The question, does my life make a difference, and how would I know? Does your life make a difference and have an impact, and how would you know? Is one of the central questions that we ask in making meaning as a human being. And that question, that spiritual question, is hard enough to ask and answer when things are going well and easy in life, when they are. But when cities are on fire in our country, in response to racial injustice and violence, when we are fighting a global pandemic and trying to build safe communities again, when things feel so beyond any one person's control, the question, what impact will my life make, can be an even more challenging one to answer. In moments like these, it's helpful for me to remember the stories of people whose lives have made a difference seemingly against all odds. People who were either marginalized or silenced, or just people whose societies didn't expect much from them because of who they were. I've been thinking about Louis Braille the last few weeks, the inventor of the writing system that we know as Braille. And he made some of his biggest accomplishments and impacts in the world when he was a blind child in France in the early 1800s. At the age of 3, he was in his father's workshop. His father worked with leather, making supplies for horses and other things. Wanting to be just like his dad, he crawled up on a table and grabbed one of the tools to cut the leather, and the tool punctured his eye. He got an infection and lost all of his sight by the age of 5. He'd learned from a local priest how to tell the difference between trees by their touch and birds by their sounds. His brother tried to teach him echolocation, finding his way through the world with sound. And his mom taught him how to play dominoes by feeling the dots on the tiles. When he was just before his 10th birthday, he was sent to the Royal Institute for the Blind in Paris. The conditions there were terrible and the food was substandard, but he put himself to work there, realizing a better way to read and communicate. The books that he was given in that institute that were made for blind children, he thought were boring and hard to read. They were mostly made of huge raised letters that you would go through one by one, and it took forever, so the books were short and he thought boring. But one day his teacher came in and told his class that the military was now using a code system that made punctured dots in paper with tools that represented different sounds. When Louis heard that, he thought about the tools in his father's workshop and putting those punctured holes and marks in leather, the exact same tools that caused his blindness. And he went to work using similar tools in his study at night at school, developing a system of writing and reading that we know today as Braille. He said that he stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning every night, so tired that his head would fall down on the table in the middle of his work. But by his 15th birthday, he had developed this system of reading for blind folks and the visually impaired that you and I know today. Now, I can't imagine that this child in the early 1800s could have imagined the impact that his work would have. The millions and millions of people who have read and read using the system of communication that he helped design. Who thinks that he could even imagine us and the lives that we're living today? Even this week, researchers in Germany released a study showing that they're now manipulating sound waves to produce Braille feelings on hands so that people don't have to touch screens for further pandemics. How could this child have imagined that one day someone would raise their hand over sound to read because of a system he had invented? How could this child have imagined the impact he would have on the world? And I wonder if he would ever know. You see, me, I'm the kind of person who's always dealt very well with a report card. I would like to know the impact that I'm having on the world right now in a system of grading that you tell me over and over again. I'm a kind of person who's relied on external feedback probably too much in my life. Wanting to know how I'm doing with other people or the impact that I'm having in the world, but that's just not how it works in the most meaningful ways. Sure, some of us are part of professions where we get feedback on our impact. Maybe when you retire from your work, or if you've got a great boss or good friends or a good partner, they feed back to you, this is how you make the world better. But even when we get that feedback, it's impossible to know the full impact of our lives. It's just more subtle than that. How do you make people feel in your presence? Do your words make people laugh, or does it shut them down? Do people feel more alive and creative and safe with you or not? We rarely get the answers to those questions. It's hard to ever know the cumulative impact of a life on people that we might not ever even know. But every day, in a sense, becomes an act of faith. This week, I planted a small potted garden with my sons, and my oldest was getting so interested in all the details of how to do it right. How do we feed the plant just right? What's the right amount of light and the right amount of water? And when we put a pepper plant into the pot, he got excited and then turned to me and said, "But what if we do all the right things and it still dies?" My only answer to him was that sometimes that happens. My child, in planting that garden, was giving voice to one of the fears that I know I have had and so many people. What if I have the best of intentions? What if I do what I believe is right over and over again and it doesn't bear fruit? What if I make mistakes? What if my life doesn't turn out the way I thought it would turn out? The answer is that sometimes it doesn't. And yet we plant over and over again. When I was a child, I remember one of my favorite parables from the Christian writings was the parable of the sower, where the teacher Jesus talks about a man who has seeds, casting them on different types of ground. A rocky soil where nothing takes root at all. Soil where the plant gets just a little root in, but the heat causes it to wither and die. One soil surrounded by thorns and weeds that chokes away the plant. And finally, when the man throws seed onto good soil, the plants grow and produce seeds and multiply over and over again. Now, this parable is generally understood as meaning that you're supposed to find the right audience for the gospel or the good news, that your life's message needs to have the right hearer, the right ears to hear in order to really make a difference. What I hear in that message as well is that we are responsible in the habits of our lives for producing soil, for tilling our lives such that good deeds do indeed take root. It's our responsibility, day after day, not to know what the impact of our life will be, but to live a life tilling the soil of our days such that goodness will take root. Because nothing comes about in a vacuum. Good things and bad things alike. The events of the last few weeks in our country are a reminder that the soil of America has been tilled and prepared for hundreds of years in a way that makes the seeds of racism and prejudice and violence take root and far too often affect the bodies of brown and black people in our country. The soil of America has been prepared so that white folks are often afraid of black bodies, and black and brown bodies die at the hands of police more often than bodies like mine. Or a man like Ahmaud Arbery goes out for a jog and doesn't make it back home. Or George Floyd dies at the hands of police with some of his final words being, "I can't breathe," the words that we've heard before. I don't imagine that either of those men or the countless others who have been impacted or killed by the sins of racism thought or hoped that their life's impact would come in that way. And yet it did. I assume that both of them thought that they would live longer than the day of their death, that they had more to give, more hopes and dreams than they were given. What will the impact of their lives be on us? And will we go to work tilling a different kind of soil in this country, where the seeds of racism and prejudice, of violence, oppression, and injustice will not take root as easily as they have? See, that didn't spring up overnight. The environment in which those things happen is the result of millions of actions over hundreds of years, and many, many acts of silence and inaction from people like me. You can never know exactly the way that your life will impact the world, but know that it will. Your action and your inaction. Your words and your silence. Our words and our silence. The events of the last few weeks make visible once again what people of color have known for a long time and know what's happening all the time in our country. That those seeds far too easily take root in the soil that we have tilled. We've made a habit of it. And just like collectively, our daily actions till the soil of our lives where one type of life takes root or another. Where one type of life is easy to grow and another is not. Even the beautiful things. Pick up any item in your home and remember that it is the result of hundreds of people touching and making it happen. Your coffee cup. The coffee that you drink, the food that you eat, the sidewalk on which you move. We drink from wells that we did not dig and eat food that we did not grow, made and picked and cultivated by hands that we might not ever know. In so many ways, everything we encounter is an act of grace, an impact of a human being whose names we might never know, whose lives made a difference. And such is the way of life's difficulty, too. You see, when we look at the situations in the world like the events of this past few weeks, it becomes tempting for me to ask myself, this feels beyond my control. How can I make a difference? The soil that's been tilled in the lives of Americans, in which these things can happen, feel different, bigger than my ability to ever make a difference in it. What good am I? And yet, it is also my belief that God works in experimentation and extravagance, trying thing after thing after thing until something takes root and makes a difference. Our calling is to act as if it will make a difference and keep planting seeds over and over again until it does. In what's called process theology, the idea is that God itself changes and tries new things. Think about a tree, an elm that lays and gives, that casts off tens, if not hundreds of thousands of acorns in its life. An act of faith, but trying over and over and over again in the hopes that maybe one will grow into a new tree. That feels a little bit like a human life sometimes. Taking part in God's extravagant experimental play. Planting and planting and planting and planting over and over again, not knowing exactly what the impact of our life will be. But with an act of faith, hoping that what we plant will grow. In that poem today from Ellen Bass, she talks about the fact that each and every action of our life can become a prayer, a sacrament. That we can cut our food for peace. That we can walk through the streets saying the names of people we love, that we can remember people who have died, that we can move through the world with our legs or a chair in a way that says less harm, less harm, less harm. She lifts up the fact that there is no part of our life that cannot be a prayer. Every single act can be an act of faith. Because none of us are guaranteed our next breath, and yet we breathe. None of us are guaranteed getting out of bed tomorrow morning, but we lay our heads down with the assurance and hope that it will happen. We take medicine we didn't make, hoping but not knowing that it will work. Get in cars every day, hoping that they will not crash. Say the words, I love you, not knowing if they will be spoken back with the same passion or not, and yet we say them, or I hope we do. An act of faith, all of it. Planting seeds, hopefully in a life that we have prepared just so the goodness and justice will take root. Can you know what difference your life will make? What exact difference your life can make? The answer to that is no. Even if thousands of people tell you the difference you're making, you will never know the full impact of your life on this earth. Did Louis Braille, a blind boy in the early 1800s in France, know that his dedicated work would lead to millions of people reading in a way that had never been devised before? Probably not at all. Would he even be able to comprehend us? Maybe not at all, and yet millions of people have had access to literature and art because of his dedication and work, impact after impact. He toiled away. And the same is with you. Will you ever know the impact of your life? Probably not. But you should remember that you make a difference just as you are. Through your silence and your words, your action and your inaction. And one of the things that we can do is to remind one another of that fact by telling each other the impact we have on their lives. Tell your friends and your family, the people that you love, the impact that they are having on you, because it serves as a sacrament, a reminder that we are all a part of God's extravagant experimental play and making a difference no matter how big we believe our role to be. Tell people in your life the difference that they make, so that they might remember the impact they will have no matter what they do. One of the things you can do today is to be aware of the soil you are tilling, the kind of environment that you are making in your life through your habits, your purchases, the way you spend your time and energy and thoughts, your silence or your actions. A different kind of life, grand gestures, big moments of joy or justice don't tend to pop up out of nowhere. They tend to be a result of the soil we have tilled in our lives. And that's your checkbook and your calendar. It's your habits of speaking or thinking. Pay attention to the environment you are creating. Which seeds will likely thrive in your life and which will die. But never forget no matter what, that you are a part of God's experimental, extravagant play. And that if you plant seeds over and over and over again like the elm tree, something will take root. That your life makes a profound difference in the world, whether you find out about that difference or not. So speak up. Get up and speak out when you believe that there is injustice in the world and this can be a better place, even if you don't know how it will make an impact. Get up, speak out until we have built heaven on earth. Even if you don't know whether you will hear the words, I love you, spoken back, say them with passion when you mean it. Even if you don't know the impact you will have in your job, do what you can to fill the world with peace and goodness. Because you will make an impact, and something will take root, seen and unseen, known and unknown, until the world is made more whole by your work. May it be so, and amen.